All right, so now we're going to continue on with polynomial long division with some more practice. So let's go through a few more. I'm going to do the next one with you, and then I'll have you try one on your own. So here we're going to do x to the third minus x squared minus 2x plus 8 divided by x minus 1. So I'm going to put x minus 1 right here. And then we're going to have x to the third minus x squared minus 2x plus 8. Notice for this problem that, sorry, that's really sloppy. The polynomial that we were dividing is a third degree polynomial, or x to the third, and it had an x squared, an x, and a constant term, so I didn't have to put any placeholders for 0. So we start with x to the third divided by x, which is x squared. So I'm going to write my x squared up here. Now I'm going to multiply x squared times x is x to the third, and x squared times negative 1 is minus x squared. Now we will subtract, and this should go to 0. Negative x squared minus negative x squared is actually negative x squared plus x squared, which also is 0. And remember, there's minus 0x and minus 0. We don't necessarily have to write that part in. I just know that negative 2x is going to come down, and the plus 8 is going to come down. Now we divide, so I'm going to do negative 2x divided by x, and that is negative 2. So I'm going to write minus 2. Now I'm going to multiply. Negative 2 times x is negative 2x. Negative 2 times negative 1 is positive 2. Now we're going to subtract again. So when I subtract negative 2x minus negative 2x, negative 2x plus 2x, that goes to 0, which is good. 8 minus 2 is 6. If I try to divide again, 6 doesn't divide by x. So I know I'm done, and my result is going to be x squared minus 2, because that was my quotient here. And then I'm going to have plus 6 over x minus 1, because 6 was my remainder. So that is my answer. So notice how here, and this sometimes happens, a couple of terms go to 0 in the subtraction part, and that made the division process a little bit shorter. So although it is still long division, it was a little less long than last time. Next one. Okay, I want you to actually try this on your own. I'm going to show you this setup just to make sure that we're comfortable with that. So we're dividing by x squared minus 1, so that's going to go here, x squared minus x plus 1. Sorry, I said x squared minus 1, it's x squared minus x plus 1. And then here, we're going to have x to the fourth plus 0x to the third plus 2x squared minus x plus 5. So here I did have to put in the 0 for an x to the third, since I started with an x to the fourth, and the next term was x squared. Okay, so go ahead and try this. Pause the video, unpause when you're ready to check, or if you get stuck. That's okay. That's why we practice. Okay, so here I got x squared plus x plus 2 plus 3 over x squared minus x plus 1. How do I get that if you're confused? Okay, so remember we had the setup here in black. So the first thing I did was I took the x to the fourth right here, and I divided it by the x squared. So x to the fourth over x squared is coincidentally x squared, so I wrote that up here. Now I multiply. X squared times x squared is x to the fourth in green. X squared times negative x is negative x to the third in green. And x squared times 1 is x squared. Now the blue is showing my subtraction. So x to the fourth minus x to the fourth is 0x to the fourth, or 0. 0x to the third minus negative x to the third is actually positive x to the third. 2x squared minus x squared is just 1x squared. and negative x minus 0 is negative x, and 5 minus 0 is 5. So that was one cycle. Divide, multiply, subtract. Repeat now. So now I take this x to the third, so that's right here, and I divide it by this x squared. That's right here. X to the third divided by x squared is x. I put that up top here. Notice the color coding. That's purple. X times x squared is x to the third. In green, x times negative x is negative x squared in green, and x times 1 is x. Now I subtract in blue. X to the third minus x to the third is 0, which is good. It should go away. X squared minus negative x squared is actually 2x squared, because remember this becomes addition. So x squared plus x squared is 2x squared. Negative x minus x is negative 2x. I can think of this as negative x plus negative x, so negative 2x. And 5 plus or minus 0 is 5. Then we have division again. So I take my 2x squared and I divide by my x squared. So 2x squared divided by x squared is 2. So that goes up here. Now I multiply. 2 times x squared is 2x squared in green. 2 times negative x is negative 2x in green. And 2 times 1 is 2 in green. Then I subtract in the blue. 2x squared minus 2x squared is 0. Negative 2x minus negative 2x also is coincidentally 0. So that I can think of this as negative 2x plus 2x, so 0x. And 5 minus 2 is 3. So this here is my remainder of 3. So that 3 is that 3. And then my quotient is x squared plus x plus 2. So then I do plus the remainder divided by the original divisor. I'm sorry, I hesitated there for a second. I think this was maybe slightly confusing that I wrote plus here. It doesn't matter because it was 0, but that should be minus because we're subtracting, right? Okay. Anyway, let's do one more. So I want you to try this. I want you to try the setup and the division. First, try the setup though. So do the setup, or pause the video, do the setup, and then unpause to make sure you have the setup correct. So go ahead and do that first. Pause the video. Set it up. So this should be our setup here, x minus 3, and then we have negative x to the third plus 4x squared plus 0x, because we went from x squared just to the constant term, and then plus 9. So that's our setup. Hopefully you got that. Now I want you to try the division, so pause the video, go ahead and do the division. Unpause when you're ready to. Check. All right, so here hopefully you got negative x squared plus x plus 3 plus 18 divided by x minus 3. If you didn't, or if you did, let's still talk about how we do that. So first, I take the negative x to the third here, and I divide it by x. So I did that off to the side. Negative x to the third divided by x is negative x squared. I write that in the numerator, or not numerator, sorry. I write that up top here, negative x squared. Now I multiply. Negative x squared times x is negative x to the third in green. Negative x squared times negative 3 is positive 3x squared here in green. Now I'm going to subtract in the blue. Negative x to the third minus negative x to the third is 0. And remember that should always become 0. Notice the zeros here. 4x squared minus 3x squared is positive x squared. 0x minus 0x is 0x. 9 minus 0 is 9. Okay, that was one cycle. Let's repeat. Take the x squared here in purple. Divide it by the x here. X squared divided by x is x. So I write that up here in purple. Now I'm going to multiply in green. So x times x is x squared in green. X times negative 3 is negative 3x in green. Now I'm going to subtract in the blue. X squared minus x squared is 0. 0x minus negative 3x is positive 3x. 9 minus 0 is 9. Now we can divide again. So I'm going to take my positive 3x here, divide it by the x. 3x over x is 3. Write that up here on top. Multiply in green, so 3 times x is 3x. 3 times negative 3 is negative 9. Now I subtract in the blue. 3x minus 3x is 0x, or 0. 9 minus negative 9 is actually 9 plus 9, so that's how I get the 18. So I take my quotient, which is the result of the division here, negative x squared plus x plus 3, plus the remainder over the divisor. Okay, so that was our polynomial long division. Again, it is a long process, hence the name, but it is very systematic. And what I mean by that is that if you stay organized, it is a process. You can just go through each step and get to your answer in the end. Those steps: divide, multiply, subtract, repeat. Again, the big thing is with the subtraction, pay attention to positives and negatives. With the multiply step, make sure that you had set the original problem up correctly, put in 0 placeholders for any degree term that are missing from the original polynomial that you are dividing.